My husband looked me dead in the eyes and said I had two choices: watch him sleep with his ex, or get out of his way while he did. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is RUTH KADIRI. I never thought my life would fall apart in one night. I married Jackson because I believed he was steady, loyal, and kind. For years, I trusted every word he said. But things shifted quietly. He came home late, avoided talking, and acted like my presence annoyed him. I tried to fix things, but he brushed me off like I was asking for too much. Then Daria, his ex, came back into the picture. At first, I thought it was harmless. But she showed up more often, always near him, always sharing private jokes. When I asked about it, he called me insecure. I tried to believe him, but the truth was sitting right in front of me. One night, I heard them arguing in the hallway. Daria said she was tired of sneaking around. My heart dropped. I felt the floor shift under me. When I confronted Jackson, he didn't deny a thing. Instead, he gave me that sick choice. Watch him cheat in my own home or stay out of his way. I felt numb. But under that numbness, something in me woke up. I stopped begging and started thinking. If he wanted to throw away our marriage, then I would not let him destroy me with it. I made myself calm, quiet, and invisible while I gathered every piece of information that could protect me. He thought I was broken. He thought he had won. He had no idea I was planning my way out, and my way back up. My name is RUTH KADIRI, and for most of my adult life, I believed I had chosen the right man. I worked as a medical billing analyst, a job that kept me steady and focused, and I thought my marriage matched that same steady rhythm. When I married Jackson, I felt safe. He treated me with warmth, listened when I spoke, and made me feel valued in ways I never doubted. Our early years looked calm from the outside: quiet dinners, shared errands, weekend drives, simple traditions that felt honest. For a long time, I pictured the two of us growing older together, handling whatever life sent our way. I trusted his judgment, leaned on him during stressful days, and believed he leaned on me, too. I never imagined anything dark beneath the surface. He wasn't loud or reckless. He carried himself with confidence that made me think he understood commitment. But slowly, small things started shifting. It wasn't sudden. It was like watching a familiar room fade in slow motion. The man who once met me halfway began to move in the opposite direction. Conversations that once felt easy turned into short replies. Tasks we shared became things he avoided. The warmth that once filled our home cooled in ways I didn't want to admit. I kept telling myself it was pressure from work or a passing phase. I reminded myself of the history we had built and the care he used to show without being asked. I tried to believe the distance would close if I stayed patient. But something was changing inside him, and it carried a weight I could feel long before I understood it. The man I thought I knew wasn't disappearing all at once. He was slipping away piece by piece, and I was left trying to hold on to what felt like fading light. The shift in our home began quietly, almost like a change in weather I couldn't name at first. Jackson started acting in ways that didn't match the man I had known for years. He grew distant in small, unsettling moves. He no longer looked at me the same way when he walked through the door. His voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before, a tone that made me feel like I was interrupting something just by speaking. Nights that once ended with us sitting together turned into evenings where he wandered off to another room or left the house without saying much. He came back at strange hours, giving me short answers when I asked how his day had gone. He seemed wrapped in thoughts he wouldn't share, like he was guarding a part of himself from me. Each time I tried to ask what was wrong, he brushed it aside as if the question itself annoyed him. I told myself it had something to do with his job. I kept trying to explain it away in my head, thinking he might be dealing with pressure he didn't want to talk about. I tried giving him space, thinking that was what he needed. But the gap between us only widened, and every day it felt like he was pulling further into a place I couldn't reach. Little things added up. He ignored small gestures that used to matter to him. He no longer asked about my day or even seemed to listen when I spoke. He moved around the house like a guest passing through, not a partner building a life with me. The more I watched, the clearer it became. Something was shifting beneath the surface, something he didn't want me to see. The first time I saw her again, I didn't think much of it. She showed up at a small get-together at Jackson's cousin's house, walking in with a bright smile like she belonged there. I had heard her name years ago, long before our wedding, but she had never been part of our lives since. Seeing her step through that door felt strange, but I tried to be polite and keep my thoughts steady. What bothered me wasn't her arrival, it was how comfortable she seemed with my husband. Jackson approached her with a look I hadn't seen on his face in months. There was an ease in his posture, a softness in his voice, as if the distance he carried with me didn't exist with her. They talked quietly in a corner, close enough that their words didn't reach anyone else. Every time I drifted near them, they drifted away. After that night, she began turning up again. A birthday dinner. A barbecue at his uncle's place. A small family brunch. Each time, she appeared without warning, and each time Jackson acted like her presence was natural. They stood shoulder to shoulder, speaking in low tones, sharing glances that made my stomach tighten. If I tried to join their conversation, they paused until I stepped away. I asked him once, lightly, why she kept showing up. He shrugged and said she was just being friendly. But the way he said it didn't settle anything inside me. My instincts were ringing like distant alarms I didn't know how to silence. I watched them move around each other with a familiarity that didn't match the story he had always told me. And every time she walked into another event, the uneasy feeling inside me grew stronger, slowly shaping into something I could no longer ignore. I tried to ignore the tight feeling in my chest, but eventually I had to speak up. One evening, after another gathering where those two spent most of the time whispering together, I asked Jackson if something was going on. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just wanted clarity, something honest that could help me understand why everything felt so off. He didn't answer with concern or patience. Instead, he looked at me like I had said something ridiculous. His expression hardened, and his voice carried a sharpness that cut straight through me. He told me I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into casual conversations. He said it in a way that made me feel foolish for even asking. I tried again, gently, hoping he would hear the worry behind my words. That only pushed him further. He told me there was something wrong with the way I was thinking. He claimed I was twisting normal interactions into something dramatic. The more I tried to express what I felt, the more he acted offended, as if I was attacking him without reason. After a while, I stopped talking. I sat there listening to him insist that my reactions came from fear, not reality. He made it sound like the unsettled feeling inside me came from my own flaws, not from anything happening around us. I walked away from that conversation unsure of myself, questioning my own judgment even though my instincts had been clear. In the days that followed, every time the uneasiness returned, his words echoed in my mind. I began to wonder if I truly was reading too much into everything. I started second-guessing moments that once seemed obvious. He had managed to twist my concern into doubt, leaving me unsure of what to believe anymore. I never thought I would stumble on the truth so clearly. It was late at night, and the house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I was getting a glass of water when I heard voices from the living room. At first, I thought it might be the television or a recording, but the tone was sharp, urgent, two people in the middle of a real argument. I froze, unsure if I should move closer or walk away. The voices became clearer. Daria's voice, firm and frustrated, cut through the silence. She was speaking to Jackson, insisting that she was tired of hiding, tired of the secrecy, and done with pretending. My stomach twisted as I realized what she was saying. Every doubt, every uneasy feeling I had been trying to dismiss came rushing back in full force. Jackson's responses were defensive, almost pleading, but there was no denial. The words confirmed everything I had feared, the connection I sensed between them was real, and it had been growing right under my nose. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure they could hear it if they turned. I felt frozen, trapped between anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. All the small hints, the odd hours, the secret smiles, the whispers, they weren't paranoia. They were pieces of a story I had refused to see. For the first time in weeks, I stopped questioning myself. I knew. There was no twisting reality, no excuses. What had once been hidden and subtle now stood in front of me fully exposed. That night, everything shifted. The trust one had built over years shattered in an instant, leaving me staring at the harsh, undeniable truth. I knew my life could never return to what it had been before I heard those words. The next steps I would take had to be careful, deliberate, and without emotion, but that knowledge of betrayal would fuel everything I planned from that moment forward. The next evening, he didn't try to hide his intentions. Jackson confronted me in the kitchen, his expression cold and unapologetic. There was no softness, no hint of regret, only a bold confidence that stunned me. He told me, without hesitation, that I had a choice to make. He made it clear that I could either watch him with Daria in our own home or step aside completely and remain silent. There was no negotiation, no room for discussion. The words hit me like a punch I couldn't catch. My chest tightened, and my hands shook, but I refused to show weakness. I needed to understand how someone I loved could be so cruel, so fearless in betraying what we had built together. I stared at him, trying to process the audacity. He acted as if it were normal, as if I should accept it calmly. There was a twisted pride in the way he delivered the ultimatum, like he believed this was some test I was supposed to pass. I felt my mind racing, trying to figure out a way to respond without losing control. In that moment, everything inside me shifted. I realized he was giving me a false sense of choice, a choice designed to humiliate and break me. But beneath the shock and anger, a sense of clarity emerged. I knew I would not let him dictate my reaction. I would not let him have the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I nodded slowly, playing the part he expected, while every nerve in my body fired with determination. I would act, but I would do it on my terms. His plan was meant to trap me, but in reality, it had just set the stage for what I had been quietly preparing all along. For the first time, I understood that the real power had shifted, and it wasn't with him. I left the room without a word, pretending to absorb the ultimatum like a defeated person. Inside, my mind was anything but quiet. I knew reacting with anger or tears would only play into his control. I needed a different approach, one that he would never expect. Over the next days, I moved through the house like a ghost. I smiled when necessary, spoke softly, and made my routines appear unchanged. He believed I had given in, that the sharp edge of my spirit had dulled. But secretly, I was collecting everything I could use to protect myself and expose him. I started with our finances. I reviewed every statement, tracing transfers, and noting anything that seemed out of place. I photocopied contracts, ownership papers, and anything that proved what belonged to me or was tied to our shared assets. Every document I gathered added a small piece to a bigger picture he had no idea I was building. I also focused on evidence of his betrayal. I recorded small details, kept receipts, and documented times when he was clearly covering his tracks. Even the quietest moments, like Daria's visits and secret calls, were noted in my private records. I refused to miss a single detail. While he thought I was withdrawn, I was growing stronger. Each file I collected, each note I made, gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. The shock and pain I carried were transformed into focus and precision. By acting numb, I avoided suspicion, and he relaxed, never imagining that his careless confidence was my opportunity. While he believed he had trapped me, I was quietly building the foundation for my own comeback, step by step, document by document, ready for the moment I would take back everything he thought he could steal. Even as I gathered everything, I knew I couldn't do it entirely alone. I needed someone I could trust completely, someone who wouldn't judge me or make my pain their own. That person was my cousin, Lennox. He had always been calm under pressure, someone who could see things clearly when emotions clouded judgment. I reached out to him one evening, asking to meet at his workshop, far from prying eyes. When I explained the situation, I didn't hold back. I told him about the ultimatum, about Daria, and about the ways Jackson was manipulating me. Lennox listened quietly, his face unreadable, but I could feel his mind turning, weighing options and calculating outcomes. He didn't offer empty reassurances. Instead, he focused on practical steps. He reminded me to stay vigilant with finances, to secure any important papers, and to avoid doing anything that could be used against me. He emphasized thinking ahead, planning carefully, and protecting myself legally. His advice wasn't about revenge yet, it was about survival and strength. Lennox also helped me see the value of patience. He said, "Sometimes the best move is to wait, let them underestimate you, and then act when the time is right." Those words resonated. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had an ally who understood both the danger and the opportunity in front of me. With him by my side, I began organizing my files and notes with more precision. We mapped out which accounts needed immediate attention, which documents could be leveraged, and how to maintain appearances while I quietly regained control. Having Lennox's steady presence gave me courage. I wasn't completely alone anymore. I had someone in my corner who could guide me, someone who reminded me that strategy and patience would win where emotion and confrontation would only fail. Once I had a clear sense of what I needed, I realized I couldn't rely solely on notes and documents. I needed professional guidance. I contacted Maeve Holton, an attorney known for her discretion and sharp judgment. From the moment we met, I felt relief. She listened without interruption, asking pointed questions to uncover details I hadn't thought to record. Maeve's approach was methodical. She explained how I could secure my rights while exposing the wrongdoing without putting myself at risk. Together, we created a plan that balanced protection with strategy. Every step was designed to make sure I had leverage while avoiding rash decisions. I handed over the financial records I had compiled, highlighting unusual transfers, unexplained withdrawals, and joint account discrepancies. Maeve guided me on how to present this information legally so it would hold weight. I also provided evidence showing Daria's involvement in secret purchases and interactions that proved a clear betrayal. She helped me see patterns I hadn't noticed, how small transactions and casual lies created a trail I could use. We discussed timing, the importance of keeping a calm appearance, and how to proceed without alerting Jackson to my preparations. Under her guidance, I began drafting a formal strategy for separation and financial protection. It wasn't just about leaving, it was about making sure I wouldn't be vulnerable once I did. Maeve emphasized precision, patience, and careful documentation. Every page, every statement, became part of a framework I could act on when the moment was right. For the first time, I felt a sense of real control. I wasn't powerless anymore. With Maeve's help, I had a path forward, calculated, legal, and unstoppable. What once felt like chaos was transforming into a plan I could execute, step by careful step, without ever losing my footing. The night he intended to carry out his plan, I stayed calm while every detail inside me was alert. I moved silently through the house, making sure everything was ready. Every piece of paper, every document, every step had been planned to perfection. I left no room for hesitation or mistake. On the dining table, I placed the notarized separation notice, carefully signed and timed, along with copies of bank freezes I had arranged with Maeve's guidance. Beside them, I left evidence showing the pattern of his betrayal, records, receipts, and notes proving the extent of what he had done. It was all undeniable. Next to these, I positioned the packed bags. They contained everything he would need if he suddenly found himself without a home, and they were strategically placed to make one point clear: he had no control here anymore. I walked quietly, checking each corner, making sure nothing looked out of place. It was important that when he arrived, it would appear as if fate itself had placed everything exactly where it needed to be. When he opened the door, the shock on his face was immediate. He froze, seeing the table, the documents, and the bags. His confidence faltered as he realized that the game had flipped entirely. The plan he had counted on, the audacity he had relied on, was no longer his advantage. I stayed back, calm, composed, watching as he processed what I had prepared. The power had shifted, and he had no idea how carefully every move had been calculated. For the first time in weeks, I felt the full weight of control resting in my hands. The trap I had been building in silence had finally closed, and there was nothing he could do to undo it. That night, the balance had changed, and it would never return to him. When Jackson returned home, he expected ease and submission. Instead, he was met with silence and an empty doorway. He rattled the handle, banged on the door, and shouted my name, but nothing budged. The locks had been changed quietly, efficiently, leaving him stranded outside. The frustration and anger in his eyes were unmistakable, but I stayed inside, watching without responding. As he struggled, news began to reach him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Maeve had moved quickly with the evidence I had gathered. His finances, once under his control, were frozen, and unauthorized transactions were flagged. Colleagues and friends began hearing details he hadn't shared, and his professional credibility started to crumble. Every step he had taken to maintain power was now turning against him. Daria, who had once seemed unwavering, reacted immediately to the shift. When she realized he no longer had influence, no resources, and no protection, she distanced herself. Her calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. The bond she had used to manipulate him dissolved in an instant. He was left isolated, without allies, and facing consequences he had never imagined. I watched quietly as the reality of his situation sank in. Anger, confusion, and disbelief filled his expression, but there was no way back. Every action he had taken to control and intimidate me now highlighted his vulnerability. By the end of that night, it was clear, the balance had completely shifted. I was no longer the one at risk. He had overplayed his hand, and the consequences were undeniable. What he thought would humiliate me instead became the moment that revealed his true weakness. For the first time, peace replaced fear. The chaos he had created for me now consumed him entirely, and I finally felt free to step into the life I deserved. The months that followed were a mix of relief and rebuilding. Every day, I focused on moving forward, untangling the remnants of a life that had been poisoned by lies and betrayal. Maeve finalized the divorce with terms that protected my future. The settlement was fair, securing both my independence and my dignity, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of real security. I found a small apartment by the lake, a quiet place where I could breathe without fear or tension. The water reflected the mornings like a new beginning, and I spent hours walking along the shore, letting the peace I had longed for seep into me. Slowly, the weight of everything Jackson had done began to lift, replaced by the clarity that comes with regained control. I filled my time with things that nurtured me, books, cooking, and rebuilding connections I had neglected while trapped in a life dominated by someone else's choices. Each day was a step away from the pain, each evening a reminder that I was no longer defined by his actions. Eventually, Jackson tried to reach me. Messages and calls came, filled with regret and pleas for forgiveness. He asked for another chance, as if the power he had once wielded could return with words alone. I read them quietly, then made my decision. When he finally appeared at my doorstep, I looked him in the eye and spoke calmly but firmly, "You gave me two choices. I chose myself." That moment was a release. No more fear, no more uncertainty. I had reclaimed my life, my strength, and my peace. The chapter that once caused so much pain was closed, and in its place, I had built a future of my own making, free, unshakable, and entirely mine. Do you think I did the right thing by standing up for myself and leaving him, or should I have tried to forgive? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.